So we've got rumblings in the world of politics that there will be a unity ticket formed between the Trump campaign and the Kennedy campaign. Kennedy said that he has an address for the nation today. I think it's happening at 2 o'clock. So we're going to find out pretty soon. I guess it would be fun to check Polymarket on this, but I haven't had a chance to see if there was a question up for that just yet to see if there's a bet going. We'll have to take a look. Lucas, you keeping a close eye on this one? Will you be tuning in today?
I have been all over the map. At first, I saw that Kennedy announced that he had a special announcement to make today. I caught the clip of Nicole Shanahan um, discussing. I'm not sure in what interview that she was discussing, but discussing all of the lawfare that had been brought to bear against the Kennedy campaign, and she counted 9 lawsuits above that. And in the same sentence, she had talked about the 6 legal cases that Trump was engaged in at the same time. So that drew my attention at that point. And then I saw Kennedy come out and say that he was determined to. I don't know what his actual language was, but it seemed like he was determined to be an influence in the election. I think it was something along those lines. Um, and and then I woke up this morning and he has withdrawn from the Arizona race. It was their deadline for being included on the ballot in Arizona. We know this also comes in the wake of him losing the case that the I don't know if it was actually the DNC or just a DNC funded group. I think that's what it was in New York. But he was removed by a judge from, or his signatures for ballot access were not considered in New York, and he's not currently on their ballot, and in several other states still an issue. So it looks like he might be backing out. And I don't know if you caught the other tidbit, but Trump announced today at wherever his campaign stop is, and it may be in Arizona. Maybe we can check his account today too. But they are going to have a special guest, and I'd like to know if Polymarket has any odds as to whether that special guest is Bobby Kennedy.
Well, related to this whole topic, I've got this post up from Nicole Shanahan, his vice president candidate on the ticket, where she's talking about the various individuals that she is friends with, saying, please don't do this. This is the worst thing ever. I think it's been interesting to see that Nicole Shanahan's been kind of out there running point on this idea. But then I've also seen her say, well, it's Bobby's decision. It's Bobby's decision.
Well, I think it's brilliant. I thought until I woke up this morning that what we might see was some co-campaigning between Trump and Bobby, and I thought that would have been uh, a historic presidential campaign. And when I say some co-campaigning, I was envisioning possibly them joining and flying on the Trump jet and stopping at these different locations and giving their speeches and having some sort of debate or conversation. And I thought that would both draw a lot of attention to them and also really begin to deflate some of the Democratic Party's narrative, their ad hominem attacks, and their refusal to engage in any discussion about policy or to. I mean, I don't even know. I don't know how much you caught of the Democratic National Convention, but it seemed to me to be a farce. Um, wow. Will he drop out before November? Seems like it's gone all the way up to 100% chance.
Well, look at the date when it started going up, though. I think that was what, right around the time when Nicole Shanahan first when that
I
video started making the rounds?
maybe it might have been the date that the decision came down on August the 19th. I forget when they were removed from New York ballot access, but it's been in the last couple of days. So, um, that's kind of I'm sad to see RFK dropping out, but we knew that it was a long run, and he faced some pretty staggering odds against him, especially with the machinations and everything that's been going on with the Democratic Party. Um, so, but I am excited to see what sort of role he plays in the Trump ticket. I also wondered if possibly we could see JD Vance backing down and Bobby taking the role of vice president. Although I think
Is that possible? Can you do that?
I mean it's not a sentence. Yeah.
It just seems like these things. There used to be like hard and fast rules about how things would work. We had laws, and then now it seems you could just ignore laws that you don't like. There were rules. It seems you could just ignore rules that you don't like. It's weird. It seems that we're in a very awkward position in the world right now that it doesn't seem like all the rules and laws and whatever necessarily need to be applied. And it used to be that these types of things were very strictly adhered to, and the letter and rule and spirit of the law were closely respected.
Well, I think what we have in the case of the political parties are norms, because the political parties are not part of government. They are the Republican and Democratic parties are as much a part of government as a country club, and we like to tell ourselves a story that they that their selection process is under the same authority as our electoral process, but it's not, and that's been very apparent in the what has gone on with the Democratic selection process this year, but it's happened over and over and over in the past, and I think that we also tend to forget that the actual selection of the president is done by an electoral college and not by the popular vote. And so I think that we all, and myself included, fall into false expectations with the democratic process behind, especially the selection of the president and the vice president.
Well, I know that a lot of states have these rules. I'm not sure if they're rules or if they're laws that bind the electoral college to the popular vote. Because I
Yeah,
don't.
that was, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson who started that process, and this goes back also, in the first one or two elections after the Constitution. It was the vice president was the runner up, and I think that was a better system. But after they it became apparent that we were going to be moving to parties, um, or uh, I don't know what was the horse and what was the cart, but it was Thomas Jefferson in the state of Virginia that moved this notion of binding the electors, and if we were to see some sort of change pushed down by, say, the Supreme Court, it would be interesting if um, that choice made by the states to bind all of their electors to what the popular vote is, um, that it would be interesting to see that reverted and give them autonomy of choice. Nebraska is one that comes to mind that does not have. I think that they have different areas of the state that the electors are bound to, and I think they only have three
Well,
electors.
it's definitely different state by state. I ran into this first, encountered this type of idea when I was involved with the Ron Paul campaign back in 2008. There was a lot of discussion about how this was actually going to work, and some states had this rule, other states didn't. This thing is definitely changed over time. I pulled this up after doing just a quick search. So this one's from alabama.gov, and apparently their electors are not bound. So you can see this little blurb kind of right in the middle of the screen. Are the electors bound to vote the way they're pledged? It says no, there is no constitutional provision or federal law that requires electors to vote according to the results of the popular state. But I know that there are some states where there's something that moves them in a certain direction. And I think we'd have to go state by state to really know how it works.
Well, I think probably most states have moved to the bound electors, and it was the election of 1800, um, uh, the election of John Adams. In the wake of that, that we started to see the the states begin to bind all of their electors, and you can see how, especially the smaller states, would want to do so that it did not dilute um, dilute their power in the selection the of the president. This is also, we talk sometimes about the movement uh, from electing the senators by the state legislatures and moving that over to the popular vote. I think that was a move in the wrong direction. But I think it was also very much tied to um, moving away from the original intention of having the president and the vice president be the leader and the runner-up in the election. Because whenever that was the case, and they, how you can see how whenever we got away from that, we moved into this notion of a partied system. So I think it was better to have it as it was originally intended.
This is interesting. I didn't realize this happened in 1913.
Oh yeah, with the progressives and Woodrow Wilson. So because it was the progressive era that part of the problem, and something that we don't talk a lot about, was think about one of the earlier presidents who was a progressive Republican leading into Woodrow Wilson was Teddy Roosevelt. And think about what we know about Teddy Roosevelt. He was really big on trust busting, and the trusts had emerged, and by the states, and that had everything to do with the states trying to carve out a piece of the economic pie of the United States by establishing a sector of the economy that their state had underpinned for its own, and that was the way of it politically for 100 years, and then the financiers, and think back to our conversations about the national banking system and how that created a unified financial system. So the financiers began to amalgamate control over the various businesses that were underneath the various states. And it's sad to me that we've focused on breaking up these businesses rather than breaking up the financial sector. And to me, that is why this narrative of history, think about Google and Meta, or Alphabet and Meta, Blackwater, all of the large corporations that we see today, and as the government, and what is the real, I mean, what was Bobby's campaign all about but breaking up big business? What are the Democrats' campaign about? Breaking up big business, or taxing big business and maybe not breaking it up. And even the Republicans, they talk about lowering the taxes, but also reducing the regulatory requirements. And you can imagine in their mind, that would also reduce the onus of the government to back them up or bail them out when they fail. So I think we either need to find a new system or figure out how to get out of the national banking system that we've created. Um, so anyway, a little bit of a tangent there.
Well, on this topic, at 2 p.m. Eastern, we're going to hear about this. So this is not that far off. In 2 hours or so, we're going to get an answer to what's really happening with the Kennedy campaign. I'm saddened if this is really the case, but we'll see if Polymarket gets it wrong. We've caught that live before. Remember when we were watching Polymarket, and then all of a sudden it immediately fired back and fell off. So if you're making bets on Polymarket, here's a chance to see if you're on the right or the wrong side of it. 98%. That's pretty cheap to bet against this general consensus that he's dropping out today.
Well, what do you think with regards to the possibility, with regards to third party candidates? So much of the political discourse, whenever we back away from the tit for tat going on between the two parties, we hear a lot of laments um, about the party system in the United States. I have consoled myself for years with thinking about the planks within the parties and how those can be pushed and moved. I do think Kennedy moved the Republican Party further. I don't know whether to say further to the left or, um, but I do think that he.
I think to answer that question, it's when the money and the media start to be sufficiently decentralized. I think we are in the first stage of the next wave of this. So if you think about some of the major campaigns that changed the game significantly, I look at Ron Paul and then Obama and then Bernie Sanders and now Kennedy. I think all of these campaigns have significantly changed the game in American politics and for various different reasons. I think with Kennedy's campaign, what they started to demonstrate was there are still barriers. There are legal barriers. There are barriers that exist that make it hard for a third party candidate to run. But if you look at some of the things that Kennedy was able to do, as far as having a platform without going and begging to the established centralized media, that is starting to crumble, especially if you look at things like CNN and how they're losing money. Things like X and TikTok, these are new media platforms. The trouble with these platforms is that they're still centralized. Unless you have a benevolent dictator like Musk, who is somewhat committed to free speech and whatever, and saying, I'm not going to tweak the algorithm and do these kinds of weird things. But even with Musk saying that stuff, we still had Kennedy saying, I couldn't get more than 3 million followers. There were still embedded issues with him being deplatformed. I think it's going to take a significant decentralization of social media and the ability of publishing information before we're really going to see a major change. But I think Kennedy started to show that the watershed is approaching because he was significantly shut out from all of this stuff. He was still deplatformed on X and still managed to get a significant following. And the country is starting to say, we're not going to establish to this, left right dictomy where we've seen the numbers about independence being above 50% in the nation. This trend, I think, is starting now and it's going to continue. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next cycle, especially to see if something like this can continue to occur.
I agree, and it's been an incredible blessing to see what has happened on X in this election cycle. But I'm pretty disappointed, and even when it comes to Elon Musk, I have to wonder how much our experience is being manipulated. And I think about that especially in terms of Venezuela and how the irony of the especially the Republican Party and to a lesser extent Kennedy, but certainly the Republican Party being so concerned about election interference and then just forgetting that altogether. And also, I mean, not only being concerned about election interference, but being so interested in sovereignty and so much about no more immigration, no more open societies. And yet, when it came to a Venezuelan election, somebody said, "Oh, Venezuela's election was undemocratic," and they they gathered around like a flock of dodo birds squawking. And when I saw that, I had to wonder because I had to wonder if there was any grooming of the algorithm of prioritizing that content because it was expedient to international corporations, businesses to have access, to have political instability in other countries, not just the United States, so that they could gain access to their resources. So that's been one of the most interesting undertones that I've thought of. I put a link over on the private chat to a New York Times article, and there's also been a growing undercurrent of continued of not just the litigation against the candidates, but it's as if RussiaGate never goes away. James Comey tweeted this morning that he was behind the Harris Waltz ticket. And James Comey was the leader of the FBI who released the Hillary letter, and and uh, and the FBI and CIA were also behind the cover up of the Hunter Biden laptop. And here we see the FBI um, rating two people who were introducing Donald Trump to Russian politicians, and it blows my mind that they are being called or that they are being intimidated in such a way. Um, and this is part of the problem also with the Foreign Agent Registration Act. We see a great disparity between what the expectations are for somebody aligned with Russia, with somebody aligned with Ukraine, somebody aligned with Hamas or Israel, and those representatives who are speaking for countries that the Biden administration is behind are they seem to get a pass. And how interesting that this happens here this late in the election and seemingly to give some talking points to the Democrats as we go into the final stretch of the election. So I think that we're going to see a lot made of this by the Democrats now that they've gotten the niceties of the convention out. They've put Biden to rest, so to speak, in the minds of America, and got around any deep discussions about how they're going to achieve their policy agendas, how they're going to find money to give $25,000 to America, forgive all the student debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or even questions as to where they get those happy powers. So I think they're going to turn to this subject in the future and begin to grind the old Russiagate axe, and talk about our friends in Ukraine, because this also gets them away from the narrative of the division within their party with regards to support for Hamas or Israel. Um, Anything else you've noticed in the convention or thoughts going forward that we're going to see coming up in the election?
I was actually trying to find a link to establish this lifting of this shadow ban. I wonder how much our reach has been affected by that algorithm stuff. And to me, I'm concerned that it took this long. And I think that the idea that there are algorithms within X or anything that influence how far certain messages, posts, or whatever can make it is still pretty concerning to me. I This is why I was talking about this decentralization thing. To the extent that we still have centralized platforms with algorithms that suppress messages and make it harder for certain individuals to gain followers or do anything, I'm that's still concerning to me. I like the idea of social media. I like the idea of citizen journalism. I like that individuals like us can get together and just start talking about things, but it's concerning that we have to go dig inside these algorithms, that we have to go beg, centralized benevolent dictators or even not benevolent dictators to not suppress certain types of ideas and messages. This really has to change. I welcome the next version of the internet that allows us to have a real uncensored political discourse.
Amen. And uh, I certainly, I certainly think that anybody who is discussing divisive topics, even in good faith, are being shadow banned, and that you have to play a game. And top of the game is just to pay to extend your reach because it behooves them to place these arbitrary controls according to their values on it, and then ask you to pay to get out of it. I'm glad.
I mean, if nothing else happens from the result of this campaign, if Kennedy just goes on a tear and starts filing lawsuits against all the stuff that went wrong, and we actually see some motion in the direction that changes the pathway for whatever candidate to do this next time, even if it's a redux, a redo of Kennedy Shanahan. I hope these guys don't walk away from politics. I really want them to stick with it and run again. They're both capable of running. I heard Nicole Shanahan talk a lot. I think she's really interesting candidate. I'd love to see her. I heard rumbling that she might run for the governor of California. I would love to see some of that happen as a result of this.
Amen. I would definitely love to see her as governor of California. She might have secured a place in the cabinet of of Donald Trump's cabinet. I do think that Bobby Kennedy has. I think he would be. We mentioned briefly earlier. I mentioned briefly earlier that we could see JD Vance step down. I don't. I doubt that happens because I think that Bobby Kennedy would be more interested in being the attorney general or in some other role in the Trump administration. And I think Nicole Shanahan might also, although I think the governors of the states are some of the most powerful positions, and California seems like could use some leadership and some new ideas. There was in the release of the Supreme Court decisions at the end of June earlier this year. One of those Supreme Court decisions was a case brought by, I believe, the state of Missouri against Facebook for censoring content, and the case they did not find in favor of the plaintiff with regards to standing, and what they essentially said was somebody who was censored needs to come forth and show that they were harmed. And Bobby Kennedy, we know, was censored for his views and statements with regards to COVID, and that censorship continued to this day. and his character, his statements are taken out of context and clipped, and a narrative about his ideas is is um, is upheld by the social media platforms. I mean, they forbid him from getting his message out. They limit his reach. Even Elon Musk did. And I also have to wonder, what actually was going on with Twitter and X, because Elon has hosted Donald Trump, and if he had been a more of a fan of Bobby Kennedy, I bet they could have fixed that error in their algorithm that they found just a couple of weeks ago a lot sooner. But they didn't do that. But Bobby Kennedy has had a career in bringing large cases against large corporations, and it seems that not seems, he does have standing to bring this case against Meta that was previously bought, and I would like to see them and the other platform companies held, and not only that, but the Biden administration and the Trump administration for their complicity in the previous Trump administration, for their complicity in the censorship and the declaration of what is misinformation and what is malinformation. So I'd say keep an eye also on this suit going forward. This might be what Bobby Kennedy sees as his path forward. Maybe he understood that his chances electorally going forward were pretty slim, and it was better to make some friends in the current Trump administration and to seek change via the court system as he has in the past. So,
Well, I'll be watching the video later today, watching the stream, so I'm eager to hear what he says and what the plan is moving forward. We'll have to check it out. Let's should we turn to the recent statements from Jerome Powell? I know he was speaking at the Jackson Hole event that you actually alerted us to a couple of weeks ago that this was going to happen, and he said the time has come to cut interest rates.
he said that maybe we should start with something that happened 2 days ago. Did you see the clip of uh, the Department of Labor's the head of the Department of Labor, who was unaware that or the Bureau of Labor and Statistics had released information that they had miscalculated the number of jobs created by a whopping 800, I think it was 863 or 813,000. Did you see that? I don't know if you could find anything with regards to that.
I did see it, and my experience with these numbers is that they always do this thing. The part that I think you're pointing out is the extent has never been this shocking, right? I mean, we've never seen it where they revised this significantly. So usually these numbers come out and they're overestimated and then they revise them down. So I think everybody's been taking these numbers with a grain of salt for a long time, but this one is just shockingly wrong. I mean, in the world of mathematics, right? When you're orders of magnitude wrong, you're like 800,000 wrong. That's not a minor revision. Like that's, oh, you just screwed it up completely. Like you didn't have the numbers right at all.
And that's just the number that they admitted to. And the timing of it during the Democratic National Convention, after it had started and after there's focus on the speakers, and I also saw a graphic with the coverage by CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it was 0 minutes, and 23 seconds was their coverage of of that staggering inaccuracy. And not only that, but the I don't know if she was lying through her teeth. I'm sure she was actually, that she was unaware of that, or blaming the Trump administration for it, whatever happened there. Just gross. 818,000. Yeah. So that's,
Well,
that's,
and CNN speaks to this, right? Because like, look, they say every year conducts a revision of the data in its monthly survey of business payrolls. Yeah, yeah, they always revise it, and somehow it always gets revised down. So the numbers get reported as a estimate, and then they go back and refine it. I would say, why don't they just wait? Why don't you just wait and do the revision and then just publish the correct number? Like, what's the point of pre-releasing the data that is way too high? Just wait for this and publish the data that is correct when it's actually correct. If you know how to do it, then this should be part of your process. Just refine it and don't do it that way.
well, it's just a political baton to be passed around from members of the administration. So here on the wake of this, now they've admitted to fewer jobs, and
But it's par for the course, right? That's, I guess, what I'm saying. Because when you pointed this out, uh, my first response is, well, that's what they always do. The only thing that's really super shocking in this is that it's the magnitude. Like, this is not a small number. Like, this is way off. This is significantly off. Like, that's not a minor miscount. If you were to just think about how long does it take me to count to this number, it takes you a long time. Like, to have this number be this wrong, it's almost on the level of malfeasance at this point. Like, it's not incompetence, it's not just an error in how the data is collected, but rather this is really looking like it's corruption to me.
oh, it's certainly corruption, but it's designed that way. So, and going into, I mean, also the timing of the release is no surprise, because we've known that there was a large economic symposium going on in Jackson Hole, that the economy of the United States has long been um, taken over by financial interests, and is about passing money around and not actually creating things, and relies on cheap gas fees. We've known that the price inflation was out of hand, and that the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, and one of the things that it is supposed to strive to achieve is price stability, and the second thing that it is supposed to achieve is employment. And so, uh, if, as they were holding interest rates up, it was affecting employment. Employment was going down. Now those numbers have been released. The graph is actually adjusted, and it frees them up to adjust interest rates um, to bring down interest rates, even though it will not address the problem of the that they haven't soaked up the massive amount of dollars that have been created. And so I think we're certainly going to see um, the FOMC reduce their interest rates going forward, and Jerome Powell is about to set that up in his conversation. Um, so I, I think this will also be an interesting address to listen to and to keep an eye on, because the other thing that this will do is give the Biden Harris administration fuel to talk about what they're doing for the economy, and sadly, I mean, great that moves are being made to try to address some of these problems. But one, the dual mandate of the Federal Reserve is a problem, because how can you have two masters? Um, and and secondly, it's sad to me that our um, that the political focus is on November, and there doesn't seem to be any thought to what the broader implications of that will be. So um, that's all. Those are my thoughts there.
That's one of the things I was noticing about the election and just the way everything is working. You guys are mentioning this is the timing of everything, just the way that they kind of compound it all. Like, okay, now we have the DNC convention. Now Kennedy's going to have a speech. Now something's going to go on. And one of the things that I really tuned into with the Democratic National Convention that I was listening to was the emphasis that they're putting onto the just we have only 70 days left, or we have X amount of days left to make this happen. And they're just putting so much emphasis on that, just what they're going to do in that short amount of time. And it's just, you don't really see that with the Republican Party. You don't really see Republicans saying, we have this many days left or this or that. But the Democrats are just making it such a front stage issue. We have 65 days to change the nation and make sure we don't put Trump into office and all this, actions that they want to take.
Well, yeah, there's the timing. The timing is no coincidence, and sadly, we also have the sentencing for Trump's conviction in New York coming up, and I don't think that the sentencing timing was any coincidence either. It was moved to be after the Republican National Convention, after the Democratic National Convention, and to be a news item going into the final stretch of the election. So we're also going to see that reemerge coming up, and that'll be another bone of contention between the two going into the election. So there was another piece of news that sort of floated up to my mind, but it's drifted away. That's I don't know. I'm a little bit dispirited. Also, I had some. By the way, Grant, you didn't mention Atros Perot earlier, another third party candidate who pushed the needle, but also found.
I guess because I'm less familiar with it, that it was a little bit before, my real emphasis into politics. I know it was an important campaign. I think mostly in the way that it was intended to react to and ensure that that never happened again, right? It sort of set the stage for never allowing a third party to ever do what he did ever again. Am I getting that right? I mean, because that's my response to.
Oh yeah, and he took so much blame. I also
what all the other ones that I mentioned, it actually had a long lasting impact on politics, right? I could break down each of those and say, okay, the result of this campaign is here's what we see in American politics as a result. So I guess what maybe we would say about the Perot campaign is after his campaign, it essentially eliminated the ability for any third party candidate to ever do that ever again.
Well, he was also leading into his campaign was the issue of NAFTA, and we talk about the uniparty, the rhinos, the globalists that are certainly in control in the Democratic Party and seem to be losing control of the Republican Party in the wake of Trump. But Atros Perot was very much an America first, and he was a geek with big ears who had all these charts, and he'd come on the television, and I believe he was played on cable news. I was a teenager, but my dad was a big Atros Perot fan, and so I was exposed to him and sort of grappling with what his campaign meant. But in the wake of it, he was blamed for stealing votes from the Republicans and for opening the door for Clinton getting into office. But he also dropped out. He dropped out and did not continue all the way to the election. And it would have been very interesting to see what kind of what kind of vote that he would have drawn in the election, because we begin to understand now. I mean, looking at, say Tucker Carlson versus Don Lemon, what Tucker Carlson's numbers were with traditional media versus going out on his own. We've mentioned X, but with YouTube and with just the ability for individuals to get out and get their message across. I mean, look at Joe Rogan and the type of reach that Joe Rogan has. We begin to see that the narrative that was laid out by traditional media was not as ubiquitous, not as shared by as large a number of people, and also how much polls can be manipulated. And so it seems to me that the one of the effects of Ross Perot's campaign was that the lobbyists began to court both sides. The uniparty, the globalist uniparty, really began to emerge, and whether it was Republicans with an eye on foreign wars or Democrats with an eye on NAFTA and global trade. That's whenever we really started to see those forks in both of the parties, that the Tea Party movement and MAGA began to address in one way, and Bernie Sanders and the Greenpeace movement on the left were about addressing a political system that was based on more. So yeah, Ross Perot is definitely an interesting character.
One thing I've just got my attention here, because I'm looking at these numbers, because so much has been made about, well, how many votes did Trump get? How many votes did Biden get? And what is the relative participation in the election? So I looked at the census. The U.S. population was 256 million in 1992. And if there was about 100 million votes, I think I'm counting that up right. It's about 80 plus 20. It's about 100. That's way less than half of the population actually participated in the presidential election. I wonder if that's been changing. How much?
I think it's been going up. Some people will say that comes from the stuffing of ballot boxes, but I do think that there has been I don't know, the stake seems to have ratcheted up through time going forward too. But going back to looking at that chart, it shouldn't be lost on us what George Bush Sr.'s role was before he was elected president. Are you familiar with what his career was leading into that?
Sorry, I'm now kind of looking up this other thing that I wanted to see, which was what is the relative participation. This has distracted me. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Well, he was George Bush was I forget what probably under Reagan, he was the director of the CIA. So, and when we think about the influence that the CIA has had, as we began to discover on the Kennedy assassination, the Nixon shock, the Reagan Iran Contra affair, and
okay. So to answer this question though, the participation has gone up, actually pretty substantively. Huh. That I'm surprised to see that.
I mean, I was aware that the participation was going up, but the question, I guess, is that actual participation going up, or is that more sophisticated electioneering?
Well, there's definitely been rumblings of that.
There certainly has, and I don't, I in some ways you can never you can never know unless we do not have, and unless our elections are no longer anonymous.
Well, these are the kinds of things that I keep saying is the best use case for AI, but yet we just keep seeing AI used for job elimination. So the more that I see our actual application of AI in our world, like this is the kind of thing that it's structured data, it's census data. It's you just have to count things up. You have to look county by county. You can compare it against the census. You can compare it against a variety of different data sets. And from my time in this type of world where you have lots of data and structured analysis, I know that there are people who pretty much devote their time to this, saying, let's look at credit card data, let's look at, a lot of data and try and correlate it together and draw conclusions from it. And this the fact that political participation has gone up from 39% in 1996 to 47% in 2020. And yet you have people being much more disaffected with the political process. And I think that if you start to look at people saying that they're independent and 50% of that, I can't imagine that participation is going up when there is no chance for a third party candidate. Like, if people are pretty much saying, I have no affiliation with these parties, then how is it that we see participation continuously rising? There's got to be a way to sort of get to the better bottom of this by looking at really structured investigation into this data. And I'm not sure if I'm inspired to do this just yet, but there's got to be people that are looking into that sort of a thing, because this trend seems to be in the opposite direction of what people are saying when they're actually being asked, are you engaged in politics, and do you intend to be a part of the process and participate by voting or any other type of activity?
Well, I would guess that alongside that rising rate of participation in the presidential election, we will see that for all other elections, the participation has plummeted. And I might be wrong about that, but it seems that
Oh,
we
you mean like down ticket, like into the state and the
down ticket, maybe not so much whenever they're coupled with the presidential election, but what about the midterms? Is there as much interest in the midterm elections? Doubtful.
No, there definitely isn't. You're correct on that. Presidential elections drive a lot more attention. They drive a lot more participation. So when you have off-year elections, because there are a variety of individuals and how governmental institutions such as city councils, midterm elections, governor elections, these things usually are not tied to presidential election years, and so you definitely see lower participation in those years and less involvement.
Well, and I would like to see the trend as to whether that has been dropping, because I bet it is, and I bet that it's especially been dropping at the state and municipal and county levels.
I just can't imagine that people are all that fired up to go vote in a presidential election if they're so disaffected in voting in any other election. Just doesn't seem to jibe with the way that I have commonly engaged with people that vote.
Well, and look how we no longer question the narrative of Joe Biden saying, I mean, and not just Joe Biden, but Obama, Trump. It really began to increase under Obama, but Bush Jr. This abandonment of the notion that the president proposes legislation to Congress and is the voice of the people crying out to Congress to saying we want this. We've seen the rise of the executive order and rule by executive order, and not only that, but rule by administrative agency.
Or even political candidates claiming that they can do stuff like that. When Kamala Harris says, "I will lower the price of groceries," under what authority do you have to lower the price of groceries?
I mean, absolutely, and Joe Biden was the worst about it. I mean, at least Obama was a constitutional scholar who was very wary of saying those things. And
and on that same point, if she can do it, and this criticism has been leveled, okay, do it right now. Like, if Biden can do it, okay, lower the price of groceries. Like, get it done. Like, what are you doing? Like, people are hurting. The price of groceries and prices rising. That's hurting everybody. The answer is because you can't. Like, you can make whatever promises you want, but it doesn't mean that they're true. And I don't think it's possible for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden to lower the price of groceries with the stroke of a pen, or with the edict of whatever that they think that they can lay down. Like, this is just not possible. Like, I know what does cause prices to rise. It's inflation. Like, that's clear. And inflation is always the result of government spending. Like, that's all there is to it. So if we're not spending within our means, then you have to print to make up for the loss. Like, that's it. It's easy.
I can tell you what would lower the price of groceries immediately, and that would be if the United States skipped a debt payment and didn't service its debts. If the United States said, we're broke, we're 34, 35 trillion dollars in debt, we're looking at increasing our debt by, what is it, $3 trillion a year. I mean, if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris had an address from the Oval Office and they said, "Sorry, Ukraine, so sorry, Israel and the rest of the world, we can't send out any more foreign aid because we don't have any more money," then the price of groceries would plummet. The price of everything would plummet. But they don't want, nobody wants to own up to that. The last person that we've seen do that was Gerald Nixon, and look what happened to him. So I don't know how this works out. I think it has a lot to do with state governors setting up their own systems, or being the voice to question what's going on with the federal government, because it doesn't seem that any employee of the federal government or elected participant of the federal government, there are the likes of Thomas Massey and Tim Burchett who are very vocal about it, but when they've been co-opted into the system, it's just like they're a squeaky wheel. It's no longer when your power comes from the federal government, it seems like you can't do much about complaining about how it operates. So,
well, with that, I think that's our show for the day. I'll be watching the Kennedy address to the nation in a couple hours, and hopefully we'll have a chance to catch up on this on Monday.
All right, see you Monday.
Yep.
All right, have a great weekend, guys.